Welcome everyone. This is a video I'm currently today doing on my own. I don't have the guys from C3UG with me today. It's just me, but this is a quick video about a couple of tools that we came across through over the last couple of months and we've been working with, and we would like to share with the community what our experiences are. In particular, we have been taking a look at the low-code development toolset market, and besides tools like HCL Domino Leap that might coming in on a regular basis in this environment, we are also taking a look at the open source market in low-code development. And there's a tool set that we've been running into, which seems to be very promising to us. It's called Tooljet. And today we want to show you in a couple of minutes what you can do with Tooljet to give you at least a little glimpse on it, and how you can make it work with Domino, especially, and of course, as we're here cutting edge here, so to speak, we're using the HCL Domino REST APIs on Domino 12.02. So without further ado, let's have a quick look on what Tooljet actually is, what it gives to you, and how the architectural things look like. This will be only a couple of minutes, and then we'll dive into a demo. See you then. So what is Tooljet? As I said, it's a low-code development environment, and it's targeted to build internal tools. So it's not designed to build anything that's publicly available on the internet. It's more for an intranet solution. So it's pretty similar from a target audience than HCL Domino Leap. And pretty much as these components go forward, Tooljet offers you a lot of UI and back-end integration building blocks. So basically, you code your applications by simply dragging around components from palettes into a canvas, hooking up events, and creating data sources. And we will go through that process in a couple of minutes. Tooljet comes with a huge variety of readily built connectors that hook up the toolset itself to whatever kind of backend applications you might be running in-house. This could be SAP systems. You see there's SAP on there. There's a MySQL, lots of databases and other systems, but also, of course, we can hook up the system to basic REST APIs, and that's exactly what we want to do later on. What makes Tooljet so interesting for us? It's integrated with at least the enterprise versions are integrated with single sign-on solutions, like in our case, what we use most of the time is Keycloak for authentication, the OAuth and the YDC components. It's also working from a development perspective. It supports teamwork and joint development on a common project. And the cool thing that I like about it, it's not a cloud-based solution. Not only you can have it on cloud, but you can also have the development environment and the runtime environment installed on premises. So you have the best of both worlds, basically. And that's what makes it a little bit more interesting than a lot of the other cloud-only tools for me. So, but for that, that should be enough for a very quick overview. Let's head into it and dive into it and see what this thing can actually do for us. To start off, we will begin our journey with the HCL Domino REST APIs. We will see how we can define our database schema. We have created a short sample application that contains a couple of views and forms that we will be exposing through the REST APIs, and we'll go through that process right now. The first thing we need to do inside of the HCL Domino REST APIs admin environment is to define a database schema. The database schema gives us access to a database and its assets through the REST APIs. So to do this, we will have to give it a name, a description, and later in the process, we can also give the schema a icon to make it more recognizable inside the admin environment. So the schema more or less defines and creates what can be shared from a data perspective from the application via the REST APIs. The next thing we need to do, we have to define, is a so-called scope. And the scope more or less defines the way how we want to access the data. And as we want to do this in a really straightforward REST API based world, we don't going to use OData or other access methodologies that we have. We will just create a basic scope for this application, and then when we have created the scope, also by giving it a name, we select the same icon again to make it recognizable. We can then extend our schema and select the artifacts inside of the database that we want to share through the REST APIs. In our database, we selected 3 forms that we want to share: the tasks, a form called labels, and a people form. Additionally, we want to select a couple of views that we want to share that represent these the documents in a view that we refer to the forms that we selected. So we want to share the tasks view, the labels view, and the people view as well. And after doing that, we're going to take a look at the data inside of the Nodes client so that we get a little bit of a glimpse on how this looks like in the Nodes database. And we're going to take a look at how the data looks like when we're accessing it through the REST APIs itself. So the first thing we're going to do is let's take a quick look on the Nodes application itself that we want to access, and mainly we'll take a look at the views that we want to expose. The first one is the tasks view. We then have our labels view, which shows a couple of nice colored labels inside the view. And the last one that we want to check out is the people's view as well. So with this, we saw the original data in the Nodes database. Now let's take a look at what the data looks like when we access it through the HCL Domino REST APIs. To do that, we need to authenticate first. So in our sample scenario here, we don't use an IDP in front of our HCL Domino REST API server. We will just hook up to the built-in authentication endpoint and grab a bearer token that we will pass on to the subsequent calls that we make in to load the data, or in our case, to view the JSON of the view data that we want to expose and later on reuse in Tooljet. So we need this bearer token in Tooljet as well, so making our way through the authentication endpoint is a good start here as well. And as you can see, this is the JSON data of the specific views that we have exposed through the schema here. And with this, it's time to switch over to Tooljet, and we're going to start in the development environment. And here on the starting page, we'll see a couple of chiclets that we already have for already built applications, and now we're going to start a new one. And if we click on new app, it will take us to the canvas where you can start coding. The first thing we do now is to give the application a title. That's what we do up there. And when we have typed in the title, we can decide or start deciding what the interface should look like that we want our application to present to the users. And we want to start with a tabbed table. So we're going to drag over a tabbed table segment from the panel to the right. Before we continue now with building the front end, we should hook up our REST API from the Domino REST APIs. To do that, we will create a data connection, and this is done by selecting the REST API connections from the palette here as well. And then we'll have to edit our keep endpoints for our REST calls that we want to do. That's what we do right here. And we hopefully have the right ones. So let's correct that. Okay, perfect. And so that's how you connect your data. So after hooking up the REST APIs themselves, now let's get into the flow of things, and this means we have to do some queries against the APIs. These will be a series of calls that we hook together, and as Domino is a secure platform, we need to authenticate first, and that's the first thing that we take care of, is the authentication step against the REST APIs. So we hook up this first call against the auth endpoint of the Domino REST APIs. And we're hooking up to a demo environment here. So the first thing is that we want to plan, what we want to achieve here is to authenticate with username and password, which is potentially not a way to work in production. In production, you would have to work with an IDP and get your bearer token from there and pass it on to the APIs. But in our case here, we're authenticating against the auth endpoint of the REST APIs themselves and get the bearer token from there. And we can add in the user ID and password we want to use for the demo here, and we can test the environment, whether the auth endpoint is called correctly, and get the bearer token back. We then have to tell Tooljet to start this first query when the application gets started. The next step now is to define that whenever we get a bearer token back, we want to keep it for later reuse in other queries that you want to do. And to do that, we will define a global variable. There's a couple of ways to do that. And we will tell Tooljet that whenever that query, the first authentication query is successful, we're going to save this the result or resulting bearer token in this global variable. So we can do that by typing it manually, and that's something that I want to do, that I prefer to do, because we're a no-code environment, so we can just do the query and then pick the resulting parameter that we get back from the REST API call directly from the result set and store it as a variable. And that's the way that I want to do it here right now. So the next thing we do now is we're gonna read some data. Do you want to read the Domino view data from our tasks database? So we're gonna call this next query tasks, and we usually have to retype this the name of the query. You can type it when you create the new query, but for some reason Tooljet doesn't remember that really well, so you have to retype that up into this little window up above. And then we copy our URL and our endpoint for the Domino REST APIs to read the view data. And of course, we have to fill in our authentication part. So we have to give our bearer token that we get from the authentication query with this read query to the Domino REST APIs as well, to do an authenticated call. And that's what we do right here. And we can then try this query. We can just call it. And as you see right now, there's nothing happening because the bearer token that we filled in from the parameter is still empty. So we first have to run our authentication step to fill the variable, because we didn't do that. We had it previewed, but we didn't run it. So we need to run it first, and then our bearer variable will get initialized as well. And if we do that, you should now see that we get some data back from Domino. And the next step is then to hook that up to the interface. And to do that, we'll go back up into the editor right here. And first of all, let's get rid of that Tooljet logo. And then what we want to do is we want to pull in the data into a table. So to do that, we'll take the first tab on our tab table control, and we'll drag a data table from the palette to the right into that tabbed table view that you see right here. And as soon as you do that, you'll see that we'll get presented with some table data. We don't want to use the sample data here. We want to hook up our Domino environment, and to do that, we'll have to define the data source for this data table. And to do that, we define the data that we have defined in the query. So we go into the properties of the data table and define the data source there, and hook it up to our query area that we have done beforehand. And as soon as we do that, you see the data is getting pulled into the table, and there's all sorts of view data coming from Domino. Some of the columns we want to utilize, some of them we don't. So for example, the node ID column is something we definitely don't need in the UI, so we'll get rid of this one. And then we do some more cleanup here to resize some columns and resort some columns. And also we want to do some handling of overflow data. So how do we handle longer strings that are presented in the data table than the cell would hold? And there's a couple of options that you have here. You can cut off things, or you can make them wrap so that it's just like it's a multi-line entries and stuff like that. So that's basically what we do. Now, after cleaning up the table, you can see right now our Domino data into a view. So now, after hooking up the data to the interface, let's preview our result. To do that, we click the preview button up front, and well, you see we don't see anything. Why is that? Well, you might remember that we started out creating our queries, and we told Tooljet to do the authentication step automatically when the application is loaded. But what we didn't do is we didn't tell Tooljet that after a successful authentication, it should also start the query for us. And that's what we want to do right now. So let's define that. And to do that, we define a second parameter for the auth part. And this would give us the link to the task query then. And now, as you see in the second attempt with the preview, we still don't get the data. So again, why is that? Tooljet helps us a little bit with this little icon below that I just clicked there. And actually, we just did a preview for all the queries that we kicked off and changed right now. We did not hit save to all the query definitions, and that's exactly the problem right here. So, and give it another shot, we should be able to see the data now. Okay, with this first view dragged into the interface completed, let's hook up the rest of our data in a pretty similar way. We'll just go through those processes again. We're going to define the queries, we're going to hook up the event flow, and then put it into the interface using the data table, and clean up the data that's coming back, resort everything, make it look nice, and then we're going to preview the result in the preview pane. While we do that, you can just listen to some music and follow along. And after doing some final touches and looking at the preview, we're done. We got our view data into Tooljet. Well done. So let's first do a quick preview again to make sure that we get all the data that we are expecting to see. We can switch the views. We'll get the view data from both of our notes views that we want to access. And to make this version of the application available, we go back to the rocket logo on the top, on the upper left corner. And we're going to we use our chiclet of our application and click the version button. And this will deploy our changes to the system, to the runtime. And if we open up the application now, you'll see we have our live data in this application, and we can click back and forth. We can do some sorting in the columns. We can search for content in the view. So all of these features of the data table are automatically hooked up by Tooljet to make it work really nicely and easy to work with our Domino data that we have processed here. And that concludes our video for today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.